Da, da, da.
Talking
pictures.
Talking pictures.
This is called Corridor in the Asylum. It's by Van Gogh and it was made in September of 1889. So I think one of the things I like about it is just the way he's used colour to create a sense of like movement and direction on a flat surface. So there is the red is the shadow and then the pink is the light, and pink is red with white in it, so it is literally a light version of red. You have the yellow, which is the light version of the green is the shadow version, and green is made from blue and yellow, so it literally is the darker shade of yellow, and therefore the further away from us, the viewer. There's some really interesting arches and sort of like almost like it's got cavernous kind of architecture, which is what I think of when I think of Asylum. I think really beautiful, ornate old buildings that are sort of big and cold and kind of like people knocking about in them aimlessly, almost just spending time, because it's almost like they've just been left there from the outside world. There's a figure somewhere on the left. He looks too busy and too sort of directional to not be a staff member. Or maybe he's just sort of going about his routine, but there is this emptiness that's nearly lonely, nearly void of hope, but not quite. And it's so apparent that even with the anguish and the expression and everything that comes from all those marks and the sort of crazy directions and the just that frantic, you can just see him just like standing there just frantically making the picture just because of the urge of needing to make art. Even within that there is a joy. There's a joyfulness in the act of creating, but there's a real sort of sense of wonder with the world and the environment that he's in. But there is a sense of anguish. It's like this weird sort of uncomfortable balance between wonder and despair, which I suppose is kind of a dialed up version of what all humans experience, I guess. So yeah, colour theory going strong. So the opposite of yellow is purple. So you've got the yellow as probably the main colour in the top part of the piece, and then you have that purple lilac of the beams and the lower levels of the corridor, and they're complementary colours. So what they do is make each other look as yellow as possible and as purple as possible. And then on the lower sort of diagonal half of the piece, you've got red and green, and red and green are also complementary colours. So the red makes green look really strong, and the green makes the red look really strong. And then within that, you're playing with like lighter shades of the red, which is the pink, lighter shades of that purple. You have a little flash of the aqua blue in there, which sort of adds a little depth to that red. Real beautiful sense of light, really beautiful sense of depth, and also an insight into the emotional state of the artist. So he painted this shortly after spending time with Paul Gauguin in a house painting together. Van Gogh was very, very keen to get Gauguin there in Arles. He had a little yellow house, and there's a book about that which I've read, which is really, really good. They painted together. I've also been reading about Gauguin lately, and apparently he was what you'd call sort of a bit of a user, a drainer. So if Van Gogh wasn't in the best mental space when he moved in with Gauguin, he certainly wasn't in by the end. And it was during that period that he had a fight with Gauguin, cut off his ear, hence the famous portrait where he has a bandage. And then Gauguin left Arles after that period, and then Van Gogh went into the psychiatric hospital, and then he died shortly after that, a year after that. So this is the frantic kind of emotional despair, the unsettled energy of this piece is probably a very honest insight into how Van Gogh was at the time. And just the fact that even then he is creating very sophisticated colour combinations and sense of depth and sense of storytelling is just absolutely mind-blowing, and is why he is considered one of the greatest artists of all time. I love how, because of how popular Van Gogh is and how diligent his family were, and his brother's wife, I can't remember her name, but she did a lot of work into, she catalogued all Van Gogh's pieces and created the museum in Holland and everything. So it's because of her that we know so much about him. And this is just such a great example of how you can combine colours and marks using quite simple materials and create like the most incredible piece with so much presence and so much to unpick and to watch. And I haven't even mentioned that door at the end of the tunnel, which is like, what's that, the destination? The inevitable destination, or the escape. That's the end of the video. Thank you for watching.
Talking pictures.